everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to be covering the exciting new launch of New Qredo and the latest developments in the self-custody space. We're thrilled to have the team here with us today to talk about what's new and improved in the Qredo platform. As you may know, the team have been hard at work enhancing the platform and listening to feedback from clients and community. All of this input has been taken into consideration to create an even better user experience moving forward. It's so great to have you guys both here today. Before we get started, could you please introduce yourselves and tell us a bit more about your background and how you got started in the industry?
Sure, why don't I start? Hi Anna, hi everybody. My name is Gabe, I run product here at Qredo. How I got started in crypto, I am a financial engineer by training, so I started as a quant, moved through banks and so on, and I sort of took professionally my first plunge into the space in 2017, where I worked at R3, an enterprise blockchain platform, for the last 5 or 6 years, and it's been almost a year at Qredo. Can you believe it? So it's been quite a journey. And crypto, as everybody, I'm assuming, or as a lot of us, Bitcoin was really the rabbit hole that got us in. Hacker News article with the white paper was enough to get me hooked.
Awesome. Thanks, Gabe, and welcome back. Jules, I think this is your first panel with us, so we want to give you a warm welcome. Can you give us a bit about yourself and your background and what you do at Qredo?
Hi, I'm Jules. I run the commercial function here at Qredo, and just like Gabe, actually, I'm coming up to a year working for the platform. Prior to this, it's been a 7-year journey in crypto. Some of that was spent as both an operator, as an investor. I was an investor for Brevin Howard's Principal Investments Group prior to joining. And before that, I worked for XBTO, which is a crypto finance company, setting up the operations offshore, scaling their business and some of the portfolio companies. I also come from banking. And so just like Gabe, we actually overlapped at one US bank that can remain unnamed today. But I was front office for the first half of my career. So I traded across asset classes, and really what got me into crypto is two things. I think one of them was, like everyone else, the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and there was also something which I think draws more on my appetite as an operator. It's also the challenge of scaling and building companies in such a dynamic and innovative environment is entirely unparalleled. And reflecting on my entire career, there's nothing that's been quite as challenging or fulfilling than actually building in the crypto industry.
Awesome. Thanks, Jules, and thanks, Gabe. Okay, without further ado, let's dive in and learn more about the unique seller points of the new Qredo and its alignment with Qredo's vision for the future and the latest trends and disruptions in the self-custody space. Okay, so for our first question here, could you tell us more about the new Qredo platform and what the unique selling points are?
Sure. So it's obviously one of the things that remains, foundational in what we do and it's part of the DNA of Qredo. It's, our vision is democratizing and decentralizing the infrastructure that allows users, yourself, or businesses to secure keys and digital assets, right? That's really underpinning everything we do and everything we're going to do in the future. But our take is really unique, right? So we are using technologies such as MPC, zero knowledge proof, and trusted execution environments. All of these security-oriented technologies to really serve, one purpose, which is securing keys and assets in a decentralized fashion. And what the Qredo platform does, and the new Qredo platform does, is really taking all of these advanced technologies and packaging them into something users can use and want to use and can build businesses on top of it. So, security doesn't have to be complex, and it doesn't need to be, there doesn't need to be a trade-off between user experience and security. So really with this new platform, we're really trying to change that trade-off and getting it more and more approachable and accessible, so that users and companies can build on top of a secure layers such as ours. I don't know, Jules, what do you think? What stands out in your view?
It's almost like I could describe it from the other end, and the other end being the customers that we speak to every day. And I think the mindset with which even our marketing team has really kind of focused on articulating what the new Qredo looks like, and I think they've nailed the summary, which is it's simpler, safer, and smarter. And once you kind of actually unpick the headline here, it is weighted with a lot of consequence and all of the work that actually Gabe just described. Having a platform that's simpler means that the UX is just dramatically improved. And as we all know, like, one of the things that perhaps the crypto industry as a whole doesn't always deliver on is actually exceptional UX. When I think about safer, I think this speaks to some of the even more nuanced aspects of our technology. Gabe just alluded to the implementation of ZK, but I think we can also talk about the guts of the platform just in terms of our cloud migration recently as a great illustration of this, and something which is really, really fundamental from a user standpoint. And smarter, I think for me, smarter also spells out a lot of underlying concepts. One of them is really hinges on scalability and the overall utility of the platform. And some of the features that we're releasing now, some of the features that are now on the roadmap, is a great illustration of the fact that it's not just going to be about securing the assets, but it's about giving you the actual empowering the users to be smarter about how they secure them, but also how they deploy them. And so those three things combined, simpler, safer, smarter, I think is a great summary of what the new Qredo is going to feel like to the user base.
Yeah, great explanation there. And I think, touching on Gabe's point as well, right now to have wider adoption, we definitely need to have less barrier of entry for users. Obviously, right now it's quite complex. Some of my friends don't even know what crypto is, don't understand it. If I try and explain it, they look the other way. So I think focusing on the user experience is going to be really helpful in that, and it's great to see that Qredo is taking those steps.
And I think barrier to entry works both in two ways. One of them is this kind of immediate experience you have when you want to start entering the sector, or like when you want to start dabbling in the crypto space. But it's also, the barrier to entry is also creating the long-term confidence that when that things that often go wrong are not going to go wrong if you basically trust us as a partner. And I think that what we're really building for, and what we've done well so far, but that I think that this next chapter will illustrate very well, is that we do both those things very well. Is you can come in, but you can be safe with us once you're there.
Yeah, and that's super important, especially in this space.
And I think it goes back to also, you might have other alternatives in which you can secure keys, but there are very few that have gone the length we have gone to make it as trustless as possible, right? There's no solution yet to have a completely trustless system, but there's no need to take in compromises and shortcuts when it comes to something so core as key and asset custody. So while it might not sound as exciting, I'm reminded every other event that happens in this terrible winter, I'm reminded that you got to stick to what which is securing a private key is really the crux of this space. If you can do that well, and if you can build vertically on that trust, then there's going to be an exciting offering for both our users and enterprises.
Definitely. Thank you, Jules, and thank you, Gabe. Moving on to the next question here. So how has Qredo evolved from the very first version of the platform?
Yeah, I've got an interesting anecdote. Obviously, me and Jules were not here from the beginning, but we've been told there's, as any startup, there's this tales that goes around on the early days of the company. And I'm not sure if many of you knows, but the way Qredo came about was really just a protocol play. The application, the UI wasn't really a consideration. But how do you pitch something so different than anything else without a visual representation? How do you pitch a multi-party compute system controlled by a chain with an end-user compute zero-knowledge proof protocol? That doesn't quite flow well on a deck. And what the team did was really build the platform that you can see today as a proof of concept, as a way to show people, hey, we've done it, look what we did. And as any proof of concept on any startup I've ever worked with, they end up being the production service, and end up sort of growing into what we know today. But really, from that POC, we learn a lot, right? We really made it for ourselves to begin with, and with a ton of assumption on who was the user. And now we know who the user is. We know what the problems are. And the new version of the platform is really almost a bit more of an educated take at how does a user experience look like to make self-custody feel like a service, feel like something as simple as setting up your rules in your organization or your investment risk. So there's a lot that went through it. And if you think of our most popular product, the Web3 wallet, the ability of signing transaction that come from MetaMask Institutional, for instance, those were not part of day one. Those came about as we went along. So that's another interesting thing, that it's really hard to plan these things ahead of time, right? You need to put something out and see what works.
And I think it's an amazing, those genesis stories of platforms like ourselves, like they're not just, they carry a lot of weight, right? So the vision of building a trustless security primitive for the crypto ecosystem is kind of what got guys like Gabe and I across the board, because we've been in crypto long enough that I think we're reasonably well versed into what the hard problem of crypto is, and security and wallet infrastructure is effectively, to this day, the hard problem, and we can sort of riff on that all day long. But when we looked at Qredo and the opportunity that it represented to build upon Qredo, that kind of foundational vision is something that still is very vibrant within the company today. And the accidental productization is the same way as figuring out, okay, how we're going to actually build this so that it has longevity, how we're going to build it so that actual users come to it. And so when it comes to thinking about the change that we are observing now, I think that we now, our mindset has fully migrated towards the users in that sense. And so like this kind of this dedication we have to building an exceptional product that scales is something that's a natural evolution of what this original vision was, which is a trusted security primitive. What I also love about Qredo at this point, though, is what's not changed, right? Is that this first point about the security primitive that I alluded to, it was a very, very ambitious R&D project. It was really stoked. This is where the industry is going, and we still have a huge portion of the company's culture, of some of the real talent that's in the company, and that excludes me. I'm happy to say that I'm not a ZK researcher, but we have a real appetite within the business to not just build product, but also always reflect on what our product looks like and needs to look like, with that forward-looking mindset within the company. So it's such a very, very attractive dynamic, because I think of what it creates for the users. But for us to work in a place like this is incredible.
Yeah. I completely agree. If the genesis of a company is built on a bold bet like ours, you can expect other bold bets coming from us. It's just part of the DNA. There's no escaping. There's no boxes we stay within, I think. But it's also as exciting. And I think the point you're making around focusing on the user now is so much broader than just us. I think it's somewhat, you see it across many other projects and companies, is, you've got the primitive, you've got a sense, but the next round of success is really down to the fundamentals on, can you solve a user problem? Can you really get the adoption you need? So I think it's the right time to, as many startups, to change the focus around our users and the problems they have, to ensure we really get the next chapter right for them.
Yeah, I think that even goes beyond this industry, where we're starting to see this big shift towards focusing on the human and the user as opposed to just the product. And we're seeing people as people and how we can help and benefit them. And also kind of looking away from just monetary value and what can we do to better the lives of others and all that stuff, which is great to see.
Particularly in self-custody, which is one of the most primitive thing really contribute on within our career, I think.
Exactly. And I think it's like, if you look at crypto overall and our journey, let's say that we're now fully embedded into what crypto was and is set to become. I think the leap from the kind of the benefit from the idea to the benefit was very, very quick, but perhaps a bit naive over time. So just because Bitcoin is a promise of financial self-empowerment, for example, doesn't mean it actually will be that to most people by virtue of just existing. And I think that we intermediate with that outcome because we're building products that actually deliver on that outcome. But it's an important part of the industry's maturing process, right? It's like, yes, there is a lot of underpinning promises there. And I think, and self-custody, it sounds like a boring topic if it wasn't for the fact that this is how empowerment is actually expressed from a UX standpoint for people that do want to be engaged in the crypto industry. So it is a fascinating point of evolution. I do think that because of the way that the crypto industry has evolved and matured, it kind of started from the technology is the solution. I think that still permeates in a lot of stuff that we're hearing today. But the requirements have changed now as well, and I think especially in the bear market, the recognition that you need a user. You need the community is one thing, the user is enough. Ideally, they intersect, but they need to be treated as two separate entities, and you're only going to succeed if you do what's right for both.
Yeah, and I think if you guys have been around and I know you have a few bear markets before, there's a lot of very foundational stuff that gets built during these periods because you're not chasing headlines, you're not chasing momentum. You're actually focusing on the problem that really captures the mind share and eventually customer base that you need on the next wave. So I think that's an incredibly important cycle. Is an unpleasant one to go through, but as it is, our economy moves through cycles, and so are we.
Yeah, definitely. And it was very interesting also to see kind of on socials and in the media, self-custody gaining so much traction. Whereas before that, I know, especially when we were explaining our product to others, many of like the new users or more non-crypto natives coming in didn't fully understand self-custody. And there's a lot of questions of, well, why wouldn't we just keep it on exchange? Why would I do self-custody when I can just keep it here? And there's that lack of understanding.
It's one of those concepts that unless it's put in question, you don't think about it, right? You don't think about your deposits in a bank being at risk until
life insurance until you're on your deathbed. I mean, that's a bit of an intense.
That escalated quickly, but the analogy is right. It's one of those things that they need to be in the fabric of how we work, how we service, for them to be considered. Otherwise, it's really through painful experience that you learn these lessons. And I think we've been through enough painful experiences right now to value.
Well, we've literally gone through the entire, like the last year is in a way is that we've gone through the entire spectrum of everything that could possibly go wrong in the worst way possible. We've had the thing that could go wrong in the worst way possible by maybe perhaps applying too much trust in just the code itself. And that's and I would label that as your DeFi hacks. Like when basically, a bridge's integrity is compromised, when a pool gets siphoned, et cetera, a lot of that actually comes back to, the fact that we just assume that because, the code takes care of it and because DeFi is entirely automated, nothing bad can happen. Well, actually it can, because, code is, code's got nowhere to hide, but it also it's got nothing to lose either. And I think that's the part of what we're exposed to, which is, okay, there's challenges there still as we grow. And then the worst that could have happened in the context of counterparty risk has happened numerous times. And I think that it really escalated to the FTX example. I think that the recent banking crisis is actually different and not really a crypto problem per se, but it's still a very good illustration of how we should think about counterparty risk. So once you kind of take those two very broad examples into consideration, then we presented as a platform with this really painful validation of both our vision and also the product that we're building. And I think that's where I'd say, day one today, like as we're doing this interview, we find ourselves as an industry, but also as a company.
Exactly. Thanks, Jules. Okay, moving on to the next question here. So how does new Qredo align with the vision of the network, and what can we expect in the future? How does the new Qredo launch align with the long-term vision of Qredo?
Sure. Well, we touched on, hopefully passionately enough, all of the things that gets us going here at Qredo. But if I sum them up, democratizing access to custodies, custody being so primitive to everything we build in this space, it's really our mission. Fostering a secure and interconnected ecosystem, being able to work across chains becomes way more important nowadays. And then I think bringing self-custody down to the level that is accessible and a viable option for any players in our ecosystem, that's really what we're about. And the platform is really the vessel, one of the vessels in which we can execute this strategy, right? The platform is a user experience, is a user acquisition funnel. The platform is obviously our API as well, how people can build businesses on top of it. But the platform just is almost like a wrapper on top of the protocol. And the protocol is really where the hardcore technology lies and where the trust gets engineered out to the extent where we can. And so if I look at the new Qredo now and sort of playing back against this vision, I think if you're a capital allocator or just a Web3 user that are trying to navigate the ecosystem safely, what you'll get with this new platform is a much more user-friendly and trusted way to, particularly with Wallet Connect, accessible to anyone, to just go around the space without the threat of someone spoofing your keys from your browser cache, right? Anything that's in your computer is a risk by definition. And for enterprises, it's really our goal is to make, again, custody accessible by everybody. So if you're an enterprise that is dealing with digital assets or plan to, or wants to service them, having a well-defined API in which you can model the right custodial relationship that you want to have with your user, or completely, service assets that are in the custody of your users, that goes a long way to help us find the right compromise when it comes to centralization that it's bound to happen at the edges of these networks. So, it's not something that we'll show up one day and say, "Ta-da! Here's the vision delivered." But it's just months and years of work at fine-tuning, finding exactly what works and what doesn't, to make this more accessible and more user-friendly for everybody.
And when you talk about the network, I think of it in two ways. One of them is the network as our, to Gabe's point, that the hardcore technology, the real architectural primitive that we've aligned on from a vision standpoint, as this is how actually we should be scaling Qredo's vision. I also think of that by the network as a stakeholder, as the community, right? And this alignment between what Qredo does as a platform and how the community perceives Qredo, but also as this kind of actually participates in the validation of the network. This is the whole point of this. I think that alignment it's an essential, but it's also a fragile one, right? Because on the one hand, we have a platform that is user driven. So we want to make sure that what we deliver is from a service standpoint, I suppose, is for a user base, and it also means that we always need to reiterate that this is something that is entirely dependent. Like there's a codependence, there's on how we leverage the support of our network to actually do that. So it's fragile because those two things are actually separate things. But at the same time, I think that the dialectic there is absolutely essential, because we will only succeed if those two things actually happen at the same time, or in a coordinated way. So I really think as the community, as the base that's going to allow us to actually build the best kind of products, that satisfy our users, and the one sort of the binding element in all this obviously is the token, and then the demonstrable utility of that token is the kind of the easiest measure of how successful we are actually binding those two stakeholders. And to Gabe's point, like a lot of that is part of a long-term roadmap, because it's hard, and it has to be hard because of how complex and how little room there is for for error in what we're doing. But that's exactly why we've got the kind of resources, the talent, and the focus dedicated by Qredo as a company to making sure this happens as intended.
Yeah, and the network bit is so important, and you're right pointing it out. I think, back to what we said at the beginning and sort of alluded in between the lines, what we're trying to do is not to recreate what was already there. So, a short path would have been us running, an NPC with every enterprise we interact with, and it would be probably an easier path to market, definitely an easier engineering for a solution. But that's really not what we want to do. What we want to find is a different model, one where you're not reliant on even Qredo, the company, for the security of your assets. And in order to do that, there's only one way that we know at this point is through decentralized infrastructure. And decentralized infrastructure requires incentives, requires a much more sophisticated mechanism to ensure the longevity of what we build might even outlast the company that built it. And it sounds dramatic, but that's sort of when you build in open source, and maybe some of the folks listening are familiar with, you often think that you're building for someone else. Someone else can take this code and take it forward. And the same way, when you build a service and a solution like ours, where it can be run beyond us being the operators, you build it for someone else. You build it with that in mind. And I think that's incredibly important when you're dealing with something so fundamental as costly, right? It cannot be centralizing one single company. It cannot be, we cannot recreate simply the same model that traditional finance has, because I think, we're bound to improve what we had before. Otherwise, it would be madness, right?
Of course, yeah. And touching back on accessibility there, because I know I can often be thought of a bit narrow-minded. When it comes to accessibility, you need to think that not everyone has access to a desktop and an iPhone. Not everyone has access to Wi-Fi. I can easily walk down the street if my Wi-Fi is out and go to a cafe and use it there. How does Qredo think about accessibility and go outside of the box in those senses?
I'll let Dave take that one.
Question. It's a good question. It's a tricky one, right? What?
Go on. Sorry.
So one of our core pieces of the protocol is our ability to have an end user hold a secret and prove back to our chain that they're indeed authorizing something. And the same can be said with our server version of it. So you can, with what we call a signing agent, you can now add to our policy an actual secure server that runs in an enclave. So one of those chips that even I cannot try and tamper if I'm operating with it. And a combination of these several execution environments, the combination of potentially advancement on zero knowledge proof can really open a new window into how we can get participation on users without mandating a specific set of technologies or tools. Right now, our app works best, obviously, when we have access to an enclave where we can secure your secrets there, so that no one, not even the operating system, can attempt to access it. And as you look at broadening the access, you look at users, you look at servers. Custody doesn't have to be a human being at the other end of the phone, right? It can be, with ChatGPT 4 now, you start thinking that maybe there's going to be someone else that isn't a human on the other side. And so you're thinking about more the technology play. How can I broaden the access of the protocol to more and more compute devices?
Awesome. Thanks, Gabe.
I answer your question almost like in the simplest kind of user way, which is I on the accessibility point, where like part of it is, well, this is still access and the securing of digital assets. So I think that if tomorrow the world connection to networks collapsed entirely, I think we've got a problem that even Qredo might struggle to actually solve for. But in the simplest way, like I think that accessibility is also, how in a world where my own set of accessibility as me, the user, is compromised, for example, do I have certainty with the fact that my assets are secured? In that context, there's everything that we do in the background, but there's also the stuff that as a user you can actually implement yourself. And actually, Gabe just alluded to some of the features that support that, but you could be a user that just has a one-of-one signature scheme. In that context, is something that we always say is not the most advisable route. But if you've got the of 2 or 3 scheme, that means that if you are lacking the access, but you need to take some action, you've also kind of delegated some of the ability to actually secure the assets or make a decision about the assets to your own personal network of trusted counterparties. So the accessibility piece I think is also addressed, like actually on in the UX, in that sense.
And you remind me of another bit, and sorry, we keep rambling, but you ask us very tough questions. That's what you get. One thing that I'm quite excited in the new Qredo is this idea of policy hierarchy. You can have a policy that governs another policy. So that means that policy can only govern changes, state transition of that policy from one thing to another. And it sounds uninspiring if I sell it to you like this, but imagine a scenario in which you're building a mainstream application in which asking users to store seed phrases is potentially a big UX no-no, right? It's you're after the quickest acquisition. You want a low effort way of converting users, but you still want to give them self-custody and potentially a way to recover somehow through a service provider or yourself. And so if you're a solution that is thinking about how to get mainstream adoption, you can start thinking through the terms of custody and say, well, I want my users to have the authority of making transactions with their own keys, where I cannot interfere, but I want the ability to recover them, say through a biometric proof, through a proof of identity or something like that. And so as a business, these are really tough problems to solve if you were to solve them alone. But again, we are an infrastructure play, right? So you can use us to implement exactly the custodial relationship you want with your user. And in this case, you could use yourself as the recovery mechanism where you need a proof of identity or something along those lines. And the only thing you can do is to rotate me to another phone. I lost my phone. I don't know how to recover. You can rotate me to another phone. And there's no way for me to cheat because everything is transparent. Everything is on chain. There's very little trust needed for a model like this. But it's very powerful, particularly when you're looking at accessibility again, lowering the complexity bar that is needed to enter the space.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and it's pretty clear that a lot of deep thought has gone into accessibility, which is awesome, and in the end will hopefully drive greater adoption. Thanks, Gabe. Thanks, Jules, for your answers there. Moving on here. So what can we expect to see in the coming months following this launch?
Yes. We shared a roadmap, I think, a couple of weeks ago. And I'm quite excited about it. Obviously, we've been on some of those features. We've been working, discovering, researching for several months. So when a new platform comes out, it's really for us, it's the starting point for the new chapter that is the new Qredo. And one of I can mention only a few because there are probably 20 to 30 features in that roadmap that you can have a look at if you want. The top 3 in my mind, the top of mind list, are the way in which we can allow users to create their own permission collateral networks. So we have this concept on the new Qredo we call vaults. Vaults is, as the name indicates, is the ability of taking custody not just of the key, but actually of the collateral that you're depositing within your self-custodial wallet. And what's really neat about custodying the collateral versus the key is because the collateral can then be moved. You can set up rules on how you want to move it, and you can really orchestrate how you want to move it within your business. So imagine if you're a platform, a B2B2C, and you're modeling an account-based system, or you're modeling an asset service business. You can really define how to orchestrate the movement of that capital and really control and fine grain where those assets can move. Now, one of the things that we often thought when we built this first feature, which was really there from day one on Qredo, was what if you're on your own collateral network? What if you want to control it so that only users that have been gone through a KYC or KYB can open a wallet, or only assets that have been screened for provenance can enter your vault? All of these advanced features are all things that we heard from customers, but we wanted to figure out the right vehicle to deliver it to them. And so these, what we call segregated asset vaults, I'm sure the name will change as marketing gets their hands on this stuff, is really this ability of giving you control over your own Qredo, essentially, your own custody network. And I'm quite excited about it. Another one is around exchange integration. So this is very much in process. I just sat down with the team yesterday to review their progress. And this is, if you're managing assets, and most likely you are going past some centralized venues and for their liquidity and so on. So we're not too maxi around that. It's obviously what the customers want, but in doing so, you're obviously taking some counterparty risk. So it's important that we guide our user in knowing exactly where their assets are, whether they're in Qredo or out of Qredo. So accounts that you control or accounts that are through the control of someone else. And just that information gives you that sense of control, right? I know where my assets are. I know how much am I exposing one exchange versus the other. And then obviously the two things we want to do from that point onwards is giving you the ability to rebalance assets. So move them around, ensure you can manage your risk accordingly, or deposit and repatriate access. So whenever you want to for instance, exit into fiat for some reason, you can move your stables into an exchange and convert them there. Or if you want to repatriate capital, if you want to ensure that you have at the end of every week you pull capital back that isn't working capital for your trading activity, you can pull it back into self-custodies. All of those small things that really gives you the ability to feel more in control, but also to control the amount of risk you're taking at any given point. Any feature that excites you, Jules? I hope the previous one, the last two excites you, but anything else that really tingles you?
If I was going to summarize, thematically what it feels like, from the user standpoint, like those vaults, those vaults, that Gabe described, it basically allows you to kind of have complete control over, I guess, what you would call it, permission versus permissionless environments. So you could create basically permission environments with a click of a finger, and I think that's a massive enabler. It's within the market, the demand's there. There's entire businesses that are built upon just building permission vaults, right? But we actually have it as just a feature on the platform, and I think that speaks a lot to the depth of the capabilities that we've got here. You've got entire businesses that are building permission vaults. Actually, no, you can just do one with 3 clicks at Qredo. And so I think that's, to your point, and I agree with Gabe, that's enormously powerful. And the other thing that we think about a lot when it comes to what it is that we deliver as a platform, generically, it's really connectivity, governance, security, and recovery. I like those 4 kind of topics because it's a great way when we speak to users to kind of summarize where what the core benefits are, and and where the key sensitivities lie around those 4 topics. So the exchange product is really about dealing with connectivity and governance in a way that is very powerful. And I think that the connectivity piece is part of the course. This is crypto. People want to have the ability to connect into environments, to deploy their assets when they choose to. We want to give users as much capability to do that as they wish. But the point is that you're going to do this leveraging the governance tools that we provide you, so that when you do that, it's done with a much stronger handle on risk management and risk mitigation that what is often available. So I'm super excited about those. I'm super excited about everything that's effectively going to be an enhancement of this, simpler, safer, smarter undertone that comes with a new version. And yeah, I could then go into my wish list with Gabe, but maybe that's something we can talk about privately.
Let's do that offline. Yeah.
Of course. And I know in the past roadmap breakdown that we had filmed with Gabe earlier, one of the topics we touched on is security and risk, and how institutional investment will flow when they have the security set, so that they feel more comfortable to enter, and it's gonna open up more wide flow adoption of institutional investment. Jules, do you have any take on that from your conversations with clients and prospective clients?
Yeah, I think that now, like the requirements are reasonably well articulated in the institutional space. Like they kind of know what they want. Where we compete is on how credible our instantiation of those requirement actually feels like, and what it enables them to do. But the in that sense, give or take, like what Qredo can deliver is extremely competitive in that space. It just comes down to actual user preference, and then as a secondary effect, the kind of commercials that we slap on top of that. So for institutional adoption, like institutional has always been this kind of unicorn term that we've assigned to the next user that's going to come into the crypto industry. I think at this point it requires a bit more nuance, I think, to kind of understand what that actually means. Because especially at this juncture, so we're talking on the 14th of March, when we're still very, very much in the middle of the bear market. I think about your traditional kind of Web2 enterprise businesses at large as having perhaps pulled back in terms of what their risk appetite and their willingness to actually engage with the market relative to where they were 6 months ago, for example, just because they're reacting to a set of circumstance that has made them realize that they don't fully understand like some of the risks associated with the industry. And by proxy, they think about their users' risks, obviously. So I get that. And so that category of institutional investors is by nature quite volatile. So like your total addressable market for that specific category is quite volatile, because it kind of ebbs and flows with what's happening in the market, of, if anything, with the price of Bitcoin. But there's another institutional investor out there, and I really think of them as just the kind of Web3 enterprises that are they've got a very strong vested interest in actually building businesses natively within the Web3 environment. And they were never described as institutional before, but actually the demands are those of institutions, right? They need exactly the right level of, like I said, connectivity, security, governance, and recovery. Then the first part of that category is. And this is also where we play. I think for me it's a really refreshing and a very welcome set of demands that I get from those companies, because the signal that we're getting is that they're thinking very, very seriously about their how they need to scale, about the standards they need to apply to themselves to do that responsibly. And for me, the signal there is a super positive one, because these are businesses that are here to stay, simply by virtue of how seriously they take this setup in the first place.
Got you. So do you think the new Qredo is future forward and ready for the bull market and set up for those players to provide them with what they need?
Yeah, like that's an easy short answer. Yes, it is.
Awesome. Thanks, Jules. Cool. So we're going to move on here. So what are self-custody solutions for institutions like at the moment, and is there room for further disruption?
Yeah, so I'll try to answer, and I'm curious to hear Jules' point of view. So I think there are definitely a lot of different flavors of MPC in the market right now, and MPC seems to be one of the, if not the chosen solution for enterprise custody. It's particularly helpful because it abstracts away from the chain in which you're operating, and so multi-sigs and other custody solutions are often not the preferred approach when you're dealing with multiple chains. And so within the space of MPC, again, there's if anything, dozens or hundreds more companies that are trying to to get the formula right. I think the room for disruption is how you look at operationalizing this. I think the simplest way is often not the most scalable one, as in any computer science endeavor that I've ever been involved. So the ability to shard keys that are held between you and the customer are not the most scalable way of executing on the MPC technology. I think our way of doing it, where we're trying to make the compute trustless, and then the authorization and authentication to the MPC handled by a chain. I think that's where the nuggets of innovation might lie, because that allows us to then completely abstract storage and signatures from the authentication. And once you've done that, there's really, there's obviously another set of problems you need to solve, but that really opens up much more flexibility to what you would have otherwise on a more traditional approach. And I think the disruption will happen there, right? If we can move faster because of our architecture, if we can solve problems better, if we can give more agency to the users and customers by virtue of our architecture, I think that's where disruption will come in.
I think there's a constant process of almost demystification that needs to happen when it comes to security, wallets, custody. Those terms tend to be very interchangeable. And I think that, I keep going back to those four concepts, but they are helpful as a guideline when you think about connectivity, governance, security, and recovery. Each platform almost kind of tends to overemphasize the feature deliverable around one of those pillars, perhaps more than others. And I think that you will see ongoing innovation around each of those topics with the products that are coming out there. I don't think there's a lot of companies that think about it as holistically as we do, to be honest. But but just as an example, because I think it's on everyone's mind of whoever's going to be watching this video, Gabe just mentioned abstraction. One of the concepts that is now on everyone's lips is account abstraction, and that, if you kind of compare the UX benefit of account abstraction relative to what it is that we actually deliver as a platform at our core, you'll see there's remarkable overlaps. So I think about innovation at this point, and this sounds perhaps a little bit brash, but a lot of what we see as innovation today that people are discussing is a lot of validation of a product roadmap, to be honest. And I think there's always stuff that we haven't thought about that's going to come out of the industry, for sure. The creativity and the sophistication of people that are participating in building is incredible. But a lot of the innovation that we speak of, I think, is maybe it requires a bit of demystification, and also it's from my perspective, it's a lot of validation of the stuff that we're working on.
Awesome. Thanks, Gabe. Thanks, Jules. And just before we wrap up, just to close it off, a quick one from both of you. What are some trends you see emerging in the sector in the coming months?
Months. Okay, well,
months
then
years.
You can hold us accountable very quickly here. Let's schedule a tweet in 3 months and see if I was right. I'll go with the easiest one, because the first one that starts this question gets the easier one. I think that the looming recession and bear market is typically a fertile ground for regulatory actions, typically, right? A legislator wants to protect users, investors, and the economy, and it's typically through, with a lag of several years, but it's typically through these things that the clarity gets acquired. So I wouldn't be surprised if the conversation picks up pace a little bit in the next couple of months. Difficult to say then what follows, but I think that's back in the radar of a lot of regulators.
I'm going to take this sort of slightly implicit other side of that trade, which is that yes, this is fertile grounds for accelerated regulation, but the good thing about regulation is that actually it's a form of clarity. And one of the things that's been an encumbrance so far has also been ambiguity as to what regulation demands. If there was a set of regulations tomorrow in the US that was much more constraining than what we currently have to consider. But that at least give clarity. Then, as a business, you can make a decision as to whether you want to basically bear the costs of meeting the regulation and then go for your market or not. But it just actually, what it actually does is, from my perspective, it actually just takes away the unknowns and some of the risk that's associated to it, which actually breeds a lot of risk aversion, especially for operators. I also think that, like, when I'm kind of running out of ideas here of like what could go wrong next, to be perfectly honest, and that's a good thing, because once all the data is priced in, then I think that opens up a much more compelling path towards upside. So there is, broad topics that always need solving. Like the user growth is the one that I obsess about, that we obsess about as a company. But if you just tally up all the negative and all the challenges that we've now overcome and that we're still overcoming, once the sky's clear around this topic, I just think that there's a lot of grounds to be very optimistic about actually what's going to be happening towards the end of the year in the industry.
Yeah, if you move that 2 months to a few years time, I think that there's definitely ground to be optimistic. I think one thing, once you're in a bear market and you're addicted to a negative news cycle, it's really hard to see past the gloomy headlines. But there are hundreds and thousands of engineers and people like us that will just show up every morning and keep trying improving what we do. And if you just play, step back and play the story, to its natural conclusion, you typically get, on any industry, you get, cheaper block space, faster, lower latency, higher scalability, more company democratizes access. It becomes much easier to build on it. And then it becomes truly what, back in the early days when we thought this was the new internet. Those analogies are not too far off once you really take the economics down and scalability up. So I'm, as always, quite excited about it. I need to be reminded every now and then, particularly after last week.
We are almost, as humans, sort of trained to understand a linear path and to gain comfort from a linear path. So, like, if we're not going from point A to point B, in a straight line and as intended, then all bets are off. The fact is that when it comes to technology, or actually anything that relates to progress, like it's a lot more volatile than this. It happens as a set of step functions and milestones that oftentimes are very, very difficult to anticipate. And we're really in the middle of one of those situations where, like, the volatility of the market, the path towards where we want to be is being tested every day. But the fact is that it was never going to be linear, and that's entirely fine.
Yeah.
Nothing ever is linear. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. That is a wrap on our panel today. Thank you so much for joining us, Gabe and Jules, and sharing your insights on the exciting launch of new Qredo and for the latest trends in self-custody space. We're thrilled to see what Qredo has in store for the future. Listeners, make sure to check out new Qredo Platform and let us know what you think. Your feedback is invaluable to help Qredo continue to evolve and enhance its services. And don't forget to keep your eye out on our social channels for all the latest news and updates. We'll be sure to keep you updated on any exciting developments as they unfold. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.